Dirty solvent is pulled into the distillation chamber located down here in the machine. The chamber has a small float, like the bowl of a carburetor, to keep the solvent level where we want it. Once the solvent is heated to its boiling point, it starts to vaporize. The solvent vapors then rise, leaving the oils, greases, and contaminants behind. The vapors then pass into a condenser, which is cooled by a fan, where they condense back into a clean liquid that drains into the accumulator and then is returned to the parts washer. In addition to heat, the still clean also uses vacuum. The idea being that when you place solvent under vacuum, it will boil at a lower temperature, which means you need less heat. You don't scorch the solvent, resulting in much less smell. So with a combination of a little heat and vacuum, you end up with a very efficient distillation system. Now, in order to make it work, you have to be able to plug it into the wall to run the heater and the fan. A simple 110-volt cord. In order to produce the vacuum, you'll need compressed air, and that hooks up right there. The shop air is not used to pressurize anything, just the opposite actually. It is used to rush past a venturi, which creates the vacuum for the machine. Then you'll see on the back here the accumulator. The accumulator does just that. It just accumulates the clean solvent until it is full and then drains back into your tank. Hooked to the accumulator, of course, is the drain hose. The accumulator drains by gravity only, no pump. Simple. The accumulator hose is attached to a pullback chain. The pullback chain serves two purposes. First, the pullback chain is grounded so you can attach it to your parts washer to guard against static electricity. Additionally, if something should happen where the hose comes loose from your tank, the hose will pull back up to the unit and not allow your clean solvent to keep draining out onto the floor. So you have shop air, 110, gravity return, and your intake to get the dirty solvent out of your tank. Let's talk about that for just a minute. Your suction line, of course, just goes into the back of the machine. The other end is connected to an intake kit, and this attaches to one of two available filters. The first is our still clean floating filter assembly. This filter will float just below the surface of your solvent, staying up out of any potential sediments, and in some cases even water, that tend to accumulate in the bottoms of parts washers. This is the filter that we recommend. There's a little quick connect that goes on right here. It's very, very fast. You can just connect it and disconnect it pretty simply. Changing the filter is equally easy. It's a friction fit and very simple to change. You basically just pull the caps off, insert a new one, and you're done. The second type of filter you can use is a standard automotive spin-on style filter. In that case, you'll get a threaded fitting with the hose and the quick connect. You simply connect it and submerge it. Ideally, you're going to want to wire tie or attach the hose so that the filter stays suspended about midway into the tank for the same reasons that I mentioned earlier. Either one will work, and both are very inexpensive. Depending on how dirty your machine gets, you'll probably end up changing this filter 2 or 3 times a year. So it's really not very often, and it's not a big deal to do it. Keep in mind that it is important that you are using one of the filters at all times. The Still Clean has some tight tolerances inside, and we want to avoid the unit taking in pieces of dirt, gasket material, and so on. So always run the unit with the filter. If you're servicing multiple machines, you may want to order additional intake kits so that you can set up each machine with one, and then when you want to service that machine, you just quickly hook up the intake, plug in the air and power to the Still Clean, and away you go. Now, having said all that, let's take a look at the front of the Still Clean, and you'll see just how simple all of this is. Here you have the on-off switch. Next to that, you have the foam filter that covers the cooling fan. And if that gets dirty, you just take it out and clean it like you would on your air conditioner at home. Here you have the oil drain vent. This acts like the vent on a gas can. So when you need to drain waste from the machine, you just unscrew that. Otherwise, the tank won't drain properly. Above that, you have the full accumulator light. That is there to simply let you know that the return hose is popped up to where the accumulator won't drain your clean solvent back to your tank. If you come in the morning and you see the full accumulator light on, just simply reattach the tube to the tank and let the accumulator drain the clean solvent, then cycle the on-off switch and you're back in business. Above that, we have 2 gauges, and these are very important. This is the air gauge and the vacuum gauge. With the air gauge, we need to have about 80 psi in order to make the unit work. It's internally regulated, and you may notice that when the unit is not running, that the air gauge will read on the high end. But when you turn it on, you'll hear the solenoid click, and the gauge will read your actual air pressure. And there you go. Looking at the vacuum gauge, you will see that the vacuum, which is very important, should be running between 22 and 28 inches. You can see this one has good vacuum and is holding vacuum very well. Keep in mind that vacuum is affected by altitude. So let's say you're in Denver. You're not going to get 27 or 28 inches. It'll probably be more like 25 inches, and that's fine. Looking down at the front, you'll see a temperature gauge. Above the temperature gauge, you'll see an oil full light. When the tank becomes full, in other words, it has a lot of waste in it, the distillation process will stop. As the temperature starts to rise, the light will come on and the unit will shut off. This is another safety feature and an indication that you need to drain the machine. Next to that, you'll see the red drain valve and a little warning that basically says this stuff is very hot. So you need to let it cool a little while before you drain it. So what do you do when this light is lit? How hard is it to drain it? Well, it's actually very, very simple. You need to turn the power switch to off. That, of course, shuts everything down. Let it cool down a little bit, then remove the oil drain vent cap, and that will break the vacuum in the tank. Once you've removed the cap, place a waste container underneath and turn the drain valve to open, which allows the waste to drain out. This waste can generally be put into your used oil. Once that's done, shut the drain valve and put the vent cap back on snugly. In order to build vacuum in the system again, turn the machine back on and press the light to reset it. And now it will begin recycling solvent again. So you can see it's really very simple to operate. Another thing for you to consider is the actual mounting of the Still Clean unit. It's very lightweight, about 29 pounds. So you can easily set it on the workbench next to your parts washer. The other option, and this is especially nice if you'll be servicing multiple units, is this cart that you see right here. It's designed specifically for the Still Clean. It's very well built and has this handy shelf to put your waste collection container on. Now, regardless of how you choose to mount the Still Clean, you have to keep in mind that the accumulator on the back of the unit needs to set higher than the tank that you are servicing so that the clean solvent can gravity drain back to your parts washer.